Everybody, welcome to a brand spanking new edition of the Comic Obsessive. As always, I'm Jason Dehart, and I'm joined by,
I'm Adam Piles.
yes, you are indeed. And on this episode, we are traveling out of our typical DC Marvel face-off that we kind of officially do, and we're looking at the world of Dynamite Comics. Go and support some Dynamite Comics because I think they're in the midst of like a conflict with Diamond distributors. I think they're owed some money, so go buy a Dynamite comic. It might help them out. And we're talking about specifically Space Ghost, the Space Ghost, a character that has a little bit of history. So I know we're going to talk about the history of the character and we're going to dig into some summary of that. And as always, we'll probably make some wonderful dad jokes as well. Uh, Adam, anything you'd like to say about your introduction to Space Ghost before we kick it off with some summarizing?
I think I knew Space Ghost was a character as a kid, but I didn't have any reference to it. I didn't have any exposure to it really. It seemed like I had like a deck of cards that had Space Ghost on it, and I forget their names, but the guy who Hanna-Barbera who wore like the blue suit and was kind of Falcon oriented.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
And so I knew the characters from that, but that was about it until the 90s rolled around and Space Ghost became, um, I guess it was like one of the first Adult Swim cartoons, Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Well, I was also introduced to the character. Like I knew it was an animation thing, and we'll get into some of the history and talk about it a little bit, but uh it had not really been something that I saw in the comics until like maybe 10 years ago, as much. Um so we'll talk about that as well. But there was, of course, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, which was cool, and then we do have Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which is kind of like late night TV meets superhero meets something else. And I've been watching Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, recently too. So if you like that sort of thing, if you like some tongue-in-cheek humor with some animation and just fun stuff thrown in from the like right at 2000s, then that might be up your alley.
And I would say the Space Ghost Coast to Coast was kind of my intro to that really kind of offbeat, uh, that kind of offbeat humor. Um,
Hmm.
Somehow I saw it. We didn't really have cable TV back in the 90s, but somehow I saw an interview that Space Ghost did with Jim Carrey based off of or after Jim Carrey did The Mask.
Oh
So
yeah. Hmm.
I think like this woman my mom worked with let her have the VHS tape, and somehow she had put that on there as well. I don't know how it all got put together, but I remember that it was it was different. The humor was very different, and I've since gone back and watched some of those episodes, and to me the humor still holds up. It's bizarre, madcap, very off the beaten path type of humor, but it's just great.
Very Conan O'Brien from the late 90s esque. Like it fits very nicely in that. I think unless you count Beavis and Butthead, Beavis and Butthead was a little bit of my like off-brand humor kind of introduction. I would watch that at my cousin's house. But yeah, I love the story of like getting exposure to stuff through bootleg VHS copies from the
Yeah,
90s because I share that as well.
yeah. I guess Ren and Stimpy would be in there too, but and I knew of Ren and Stimpy. My friend had a Chihuahua named Ren. He named it Ren after Ren and Stimpy. He was a big fan, and I knew it was weird and bizarre. But like I say, we didn't have cable TV. I grew up way out in the country, and it wasn't even a possibility really to get
Yeah.
a cable TV. So I didn't see Ren and Stimpy or anything like that. So that other bizarre humor was around, but Space Ghost was my intro to that very offbeat type of humor. There's
Yeah, yeah.
I watched one episode where he's let's see, this little critter has annoyed him and he's like, I'm going to follow him. And then it was that deal of like the humor that goes on too long, you know, and
Mhm.
it's funny and then it becomes unfunny. Then it goes on so long, it becomes funny again. And you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
great stuff. And in terms of the character, I always thought that Space Ghost had one of the best designed costumes.
That's Alex Toth. Alex Toth. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a clean, classic suit. It kind of surprises me it didn't get more, the character didn't get more exposure in the comics. Like more
Yeah.
comic companies weren't really trying to get him out there. It's just such a great suit.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I remember, Alex Toth, I'm not experienced enough at looking at the differences in comics art and knowing a great deal of that, but he's one of the celebrated masters, got his start in All-Star Comics and worked in animation. And I think he heavily influenced Bruce Timm. So I remember taking a Batman Adventures action figure, which that series seems to come up on almost every talk we do. And I remember filing down the ears and
Oh, that's funny.
Heroes Illustrated style, trying to do like a fan version action figure of Space Ghost because in some ways, like the overall look, the lines and everything were so similar. I don't
Oh,
think I pulled it off very well. I might have to go back to that and try it sometime because I have yet to see a really good Space Ghost action figure. But great design, great design.
yeah. You mentioned trying to use the Batman figure. It's kind of similarity in appearance a little bit there. I did not know until I was like, hunting around for today's podcast that Space Ghost and Batman had teamed up on I forget what year this came out, but the Batman cartoon that was Brave and the Bold.
Oh,
Um,
uh-huh.
yeah, more modern, after Batman the animated series, more like, I don't know, 2010 maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I watched a clip of that, and that was great. That was awesome.
Ah,
Like I already really enjoy that Batman kind of team up cartoon, but to have Space Ghost and uh, Jan and Jace illustrated in that kind of more or animated in that more modern sense, but still with the classic imagery of their costumes, and they were fighting a big dragon, fighting big space monsters. They were in space. It was great. It was awesome.
yeah, yeah. I have not seen that particular episode. I've watched some Brave and the Bold, and it's zany in its own right. And that was while the Nolan movies were going on, so I think they were like, "Hey, kids, Batman's still for kids too."
Yeah.
But I'll have to go and YouTube that later and see Space Ghost and Batman because I know he teamed up with Green Lantern in the comics about that time. DC Comics had the license apparently and took it in some interesting directions in like the 2010s. But I had not seen the animated pair up, so I'll have to go check that out.
Is that the series that had like Alex Ross covers of Space?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I read a couple of those, um, like years ago, really just trying to look for Space Ghost stuff. Because, like I say, interesting looking character. And I wanted to read more about him, but not a whole lot out there until the series we're talking about today.
Yeah, and shout out to that. If you're expecting like quirky humor, it's not really that
No.
as much. No, David Pepose takes it back. He does some research into the characters. He pulls in the rogues gallery because Space Ghost has a pretty impressive rogues gallery, all things considered. And then Jonathan Lau, who's done a lot of work with Dynamite, is the artist on this. Andrew Dahlhaus is colorist. Taylor Esposito is the letterer because he does a lot of books. That guy is busy. Francesco Mattina did the cover of my issue, but you can go and find, oh my goodness, so many variant covers. I think one of my favorites is the Michael Cho cover. That one
Yeah.
looks really
Hmm.
nice. And Joseph Rybant is the editor on this. So, shall we dive into some summary, Adam? Shall we do that? It
Yeah.
is summer, it's July.
Yep. Let's do it.
Across the vastness of space, evil flourishes in the darkness between stars. With territories spread far and wide across the Galactic Federation, pirates and hijackers have ransacked these distant colonies with cruel disregard for the innocent scientists living within them. Yet, there is a cosmic vigilante who metes out justice. That's Metes, metes out justice across the spaceways, bringing vengeance to those who prey upon the defenseless. They call him the Space Ghost. Okay, you might also call him, let me make sure I get this name correct because it's a full on kind of thing. Um, oh, I have it in my notes. Thaddeus is actually his name. That's his real name in the continuation in the lineage and the legacy of the story. But on the first page, we are seeing some danger, some terrible things happening. There is a space station under attack. There are some inset panels of people falling all over the place. So clearly, we're dropping right into the action. There is, by the time we get to the panel at the bottom of the page, a young character featured for us to check out. A couple of young characters there, and uh, a monkey character that we can talk a little bit about. I'm not sure what Blip adds overall, but if you like your plucky animal sidekicks, we do have that going on. So we have Jace and Jan in that panel. This is kind of their background and where they come from, which I don't think we have seen before in comics. I don't think we've seen that. And that is not to be confused with Jason and Jaina. Okay, everybody, we have Jace and Jan in Space Ghost, but Jason and Jana are actually the kids of Han Solo and Leia Organa in the, I guess now unofficial Star Wars continuation series of the 80s and 90s, the Timothy Zahn world. So I actually had to go back and just remind myself because initially I was like, oh, it's Jason and Jaina. No, those are solos. Before they were retconned and we had Ben and all of that. Anywho, that was my good deed for the day, Adam. Clearing up some pop culture mythology there.
Well done. Well done.
So we travel to the next page and we are looking at these characters being separated from the people that they love. This is sort of the origin of so many heroic comic book characters. Some kind of tragedy is befalling them, and then we have the Order of Brack, I suppose you might call them, sort of jumping in. Now, this is again reclaiming some of the original threat that a villain might offer because for fans of the TV show Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Brack was kind of a hilarious sidekick character. All of them were very humorous, but in this case we have these characters, Brack being one of them, with a gun, some sort of weapon that's doing some really interesting floating artwork there. And so we have a few pages of these characters being threatened. They're being threatened by this intergalactic menace. We see some pages of chaos, and then into the fray drops Space Ghost. He drops in. That they say, "What are you?" So we don't really have a clear idea of who Space Ghost is or where he comes from. We're sort of seeing him in the Pepose universe as the kids might see him when they first encounter him. And he's not plucky. He's not even Hanna-Barbera like Welcome to Your Saturday Morning Breakfast cereal. He's a little more threatening here. He's mostly in shadow, kind of a dark character, and he says a ghost, and we have ghostly swirls of space dust around him, and of course the icon comes through. He's next seen in silhouette. The kids are not quite sure what to make of this character, but soon enough they're going to discover that they now have a surrogate father in him, which we can kind of trace back into some of the origins of the character. So they're doing their best to survive, kind of trying to get away from Space Ghost here, and then they start to see that he's doing some good. He's breaking down some of the threat that's against them and some very active panels. Space Ghost must work out, or maybe it's just the suit because he's rippling with muscles. I mean, he's like Chris Hemsworth on additional Chris Hemsworth here. There is no dad bod to this god bod. That is all bicep just rippling. And so as we travel through the issue, we see more of the Galactic Patrol threatening the kids as they're trying to get away. And what I really like about this issue in particular, uh, the action's pretty simple in terms of like there are kids on a space station, they're trying to get away, someone saves them. I mean, that's kind of like the short summary of it. But we get to see a little bit of the character work that we don't necessarily have from some of the other comics and animation that's come along. And we get to see these characters who have some really like oversized, humorous designs in some ways be kind of threatening and menacing. So the kids are then threatened again. We get a little bit of the background on Blip with a nice plucky close up of Blip there, the monkey sidekick character. They say our dad built Blip's neural implant so he could learn things faster than any normal chimp. It could revolutionize brain medicine or even artificial intelligence. So we have some nice tie in to technology there, as well as a little explanation of why this monkey character is part of the story to begin with. And then we have this really sort of like nice look at Captain Brack, the character, and some of these enemies that are part of the story. I couldn't help but flash back to Space Ghost Coast to Coast as I was looking at this character represented here, but in a nice three-panel page. We get the character sort of looming, again, menacing, almost looking lion or tiger-like, or bear even, oh my, and then in great action panel stance, Space Ghost again intervenes. So the kids by this point are starting to see, hey, this guy might not be so bad. Maybe he's actually fighting on our side. They're chased. Space Ghost does face down Brack, and then there's a great panel of him sort of doing almost a Bane punch on Brack here, saying like, "Not after you spend the next 6 months in traction." So this Space Ghost is not messing around. He's not making jokes. None of that kind of stuff. The kids are then kind of off to themselves. They're looking very sad because they've just lost everything. They're separated from the people and the life that they know and they love. And then sort of the softer side of Space Ghost. Space Ghost comes in. They say, the kids are saying, there's no one left to help us, Chase. Everyone else is gone. And Space Ghost comes in with his heroic side again here, not just the fighter, but he says, no, not everyone. I'm here. And next we travel to Ghost Planet. It's a great setup for a series, and I think Adam and I both read issues 1 through 3, but I've read pretty well into the run, and apparently it's taken off. Space Ghost is now combined with Johnny Quest in a new book that just launched from Dynamite. So I'm hoping great things for the character and great things for the creative teams. How was my summary, Adam? Was I too rambly?
Nope, that was a great summary. Thought you were on point with every bit of it. That was very good. I'd
Thank
like
you.
to go back and get your take on Space Ghost introduction here because in my head when I see his very first appearance in the issue, it harkens back to one of the characters we've already discussed. With
Hmm.
yep, it's basically it kind of feels a little bit like Batman in space.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah, we do have some of like the science fiction elements here that are like, he's got those cool gauntlets, he's got things that do stuff. So it is kind of like Batman technology amped up maybe a little bit, maybe a little Batman Moon Knight crossover in a way in space.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I love the art in it. I think, like you say, when you were talking about, just how big Space Ghost looks. There's not a page number on it, but the panel I was looking at when you said that, the one with the dialogue, "Holy cow, look what he did to those drones." Is that the one you were looking at where he just seems to be massive?
Mhm,
But
mhm. Like diving in. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's such a good look with that character, with that suit, with those colors. Um, he's a very intimidating figure in this, and of course, he's scared the heck out of the kids. I thought it was interesting that Jace got in a good uh, hit against the enemies. I mean, I think he basically fried one, didn't he? With
Hmm,
turning on the jet engines and blowing,
yeah.
yeah, blowing Brack's partner. I think blowing him away pretty much.
Yeah, the
I
kids have
thought,
some nice agency that comes through there too, which kind of makes sense as they're part of. I mean, they really form a team, which I haven't rewatched the Hanna-Barbera series in a hot minute, but that's kind of how they're presented. They're like their trio, and the kids do get in trouble, and Space Ghost tends to help out, but the kids do things too.
yeah. And the monkey, you mentioned the monkey, and the monkey is kind of like the focus, at least of the first few issues. I feel like is like trying to
Hmm,
get the monkey because the monkey is not just a monkey. It is, what is it? It's the binary language integrated prototype, but we call him Blip. So I don't know Blip's history across the other incarnations of Space Ghost in these characters. I don't know if he was something more, if he was just a cheeky sidekick, as you say.
hmm.
But kind of interesting here. They give him a reason to be there. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
even even their dad. Before he gets killed here in the beginning, he says something like, he's not just a pet. He's more important. And it's what everybody's after. Everybody wants this. And it seems like Space Ghost, his main enemy is, what is it, Robocore?
Robocore. We kind of have the background enemy thing happening, and then we have like there is that definite arc to it, but it also like issue three has I think she's called the Black Widow. She shows
Right.
up, and so there are these like Molten Man shows up. All of the villains make their appearances in one way or another. So they're kind of the Shadow Corporation, and that also goes back somewhat to the 2010s. They gave Space Ghost a tragic, terrible origin. If you've read the Joe Kelly, I believe it is, an Ariel Olivetti comic from around
Right.
like 2011,
Uh-huh.
that's the corporation that actually goes back and like they murder his wife and she's pregnant with his child and it's terrible. Like I had some like trauma response to that book. It was not what I was expecting from Space Ghost. So that's another thing kind of that Pepose is doing here. He's got,
Hmm.
Space Ghost Coast to Coast, but then he's also got the 2010 series, which took it to much like darker places to kind of balance out. And I think he does a pretty good job getting that tone kind of somewhere in between.
Yeah, I was a little confused there for just for a second. I think with number two, it opens up with the death of Space Ghost family. Um,
Hmm,
in the first few pages, anyway, it's there, and so you know, uh, it just seems to be such a part of comics, like you said, the whole death and loss and uh, rebuilding and vengeance and all those things. So. Uh, something that's been done before, but I think it works. I think it works with the character to give him, motivation and that grim demeanor. Kind of
yeah.
makes sense the way he is with the kids, almost like, he's pretty gruff there in the second issue. By the third issue, it seems like he's kind of loosened up with them and taken them more as, partners or sidekicks.
Hmm,
It kind of
hmm.
makes sense. It's almost like he's afraid to get close or something like that because of his loss. So interesting character
Yeah.
dynamics. Character with
Yeah.
some depth there. I like it. I like it. Have you read more David Pepose stuff? I'm not sure if I have.
I have read he did the Savage Avengers, liked that a lot. There was a series that he did for Mad Cave called The Devil Wears My Face, I think is what it is, which is straight horror. And he did The Punisher for Marvel, kind of the not reboot, but the different take that came out in the 4 issue miniseries, I think last year. So I've read a little bit of his stuff here and there, and enjoyed him a good bit. He's also currently writing Captain Planet, I believe, and I think he's taking on another project somewhere around there, I think.
So is he still the current writer on Space Ghost?
So for the new issues, I think they're, like I said, they have Space Ghost teaming up with Johnny Quest. It's called Space Quest. And I think that Joe Casey is now taking over the writing
Oh,
while
okay.
David does some Captain Planet stuff. Captain Planet with a beard.
Yeah, and I like that. I have the number one of that. I'm still waiting on two. I think it's out, but maybe it's on its way to me. Um,
Yeah.
I enjoyed the Captain Planet take again, much darker than the Saturday morning cartoon of the 90s, but still good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Definitely so. And we've talked about this, off of the show because we know each other. We hang out
Yep.
even. Yeah. It's great to see some of these characters and properties get brought back in some way and get some attention on them. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes, they sort of come back for a little while and then go away. One thing I'll say again in service of the art on this issue, um, Jonathan Lau, as I was looking up his credits and just refreshing myself, I've seen him a good bit because he's actually worked with Dynamite across like Battlestar Galactica. He's done several books in that world. He is kind of one of the go-to artists for some of the pulp characters too. So he's worked on the Phantom, he's worked on Green Hornet, even some of the lesser knowns like Black Bat. They do a lot at or have done a lot at Dynamite with bringing back some of those pulp characters, and he seems to have his talents put to good use there in getting some of these characters some limelight.
Well, he does a good job. He's a great artist. The detail is just amazing here, and it just says artist for him, so there's no inker. So he's carrying all the artistic duties except for the coloring, and I think he has interesting shots and clear storytelling, and again makes Space Ghost look menacing and
Mhm.
threatening. Yeah, very heroic. Also,
I
uh,
also like how he and a lot of the cover artists, I mentioned like some of that space dust and some of the like swirling factors, for lack of a better word. We talked about the Kirby Crackle on here, but those swirling like space factors, like in a lot of the issues and covers, there's some of that comes through that kind of highlights the special effects, if you will, of like a science fiction comic pretty nicely too.
yeah, yeah, I really like it. I would also like to see, like, I love this, kind of grim and gritty, more adult take on Space Ghost. I love it. I would also like to see like a really well done kind of nod to the Saturday morning cartoon type of comic series. Kind of like
Mhm.
the Batman adventures, that
Yeah.
but it definitely had that, like I could give it to my 10-year-old and know that it would all be fine. But also I could enjoy it myself. So that kind of, you know, appeals to adults, appeals to children. I'd love to see a Space Ghost like that. I think that would be really a really fun series.
Have you ever read Future Quest by Jeff Parker?
No.
Okay, so if you're looking for Space Ghost, it also has Johnny Quest and some of the other Hanna-Barbera type characters in it. Evan Shaner, Doc Shaner is the illustrator.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I enjoyed that one a lot, and it was also around 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And from what I recall, now double check me because I would hate to put anything into the hands of a child that would be, upsetting. Um, from what I recall, they were pretty. like all audience friendly. It was when DC had the license, and it's under like Hanna-Barbera Universe Future Quest Presents. Rob Williams also worked on it. Aaron Lopresti worked on it. So Matt Ryan was on it. So could be a good recommendation if you're looking for something that harkens back a little bit.
Cool. I'll look that up. I would
Yeah,
imagine it's on the DC app, but I don't know, maybe not now that Space Ghost is owned by a different company, but I'll check it out. I'll see where I can find
yeah.
it.
Those licenses, man, they get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
they travel back and forth on some of these characters, but I want a Space Ghost action figure. I think these villains especially have the potential to be a cool action figure line, kind of in the tradition of some of those animated meets action figure lines. There's probably a lunchbox out there. I need to get my hands on that. And I have a lot of appreciation for this character just because I'm starting to appreciate more about Alex Toth the more I learn about art. I love the fact that it was like the Saturday morning cartoon bit, but then it's been extended and, from like the parody show. Now we have the series that's been done that takes it to darker places, and we kind of have this balanced out series. So I'm glad that Dynamite's bringing some of this stuff back and exploring stuff. I use
Well,
too
who
many
else?
stuffs there.
Who else would you like to see brought back? We've had so many. You got Space Ghost, you got Captain Planet, you got in issue number two, it was I think what you were talking about. Um, what is it? Johnny Quest.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Johnny Quest preview. So like all these things are being brought back. It's something to put you on the spot. What is
Sure.
a property that you'd like brought back? The reason why I'm asking this
Mm,
question is because one dawned on me. We've talked about this before, and I didn't have a good answer. Um, but there is something I think I'd like to see uh, done with some modern creators. I think could be really fun, and that would
uh,
be Hong Kong Fooey.
ah. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I had a Hong Kong, I still have it, a Hong Kong Fooey comic that was in that very first stack that my dad got me. And it was definitely Saturday morning cartoon type of stuff. But I'm not saying I would want to see it go all grim and gritty, but I think that'd be fun. I
Yeah.
think you could get some very interesting stories out of that concept. Kind of meet somewhere in the middle with like it's almost all ages, but then there's also some elements to it that could be, it kind of reminds me of like, it could remind me of what the Flintstones did. I think they did like a 12 issue series years ago that was, that definitely traveled into some deeper areas of storytelling. I'd like to see
Hmm.
that. I know
Yeah.
that sounds
Yeah.
ridiculous, but that's the fun of
No,
comics. That's the fun
they
of
can do
comics.
anything.
They
Captain
can.
Carrot, man. Captain Carrot.
Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot was awesome.
Yes, he was. A McFarlane action figure now. Now let me think here. I have a couple of possibilities. Now I would have said if you'd asked me that a year ago, I would have said Silverhawks, but we've seen that,
Yeah.
and I've enjoyed that series. We talked to Ed Brisson about that a few eps ago. I don't say episode anymore. I say eps. So a
Yeah,
few
it's
eps
good.
ago we talked with him. I'm trying. I'm trying. Um, there are a couple of like lesser known pulp characters. Do you know the artist Mayday Trip?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
They were at Heroes Con, and I happened by the table, the good old table at Heroes Con, back near where the concessions used to be. And there is a character called Crimson Clown.
Crimson Clown.
Yes. Now, what's cool about this character is he was created by the same guy that created Zorro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the spot, I
Interesting.
don't remember the guy's name. But of course, in the show notes, I can put it, or I'll just do a little voiceover here to make me sound like I know everything. Johnston McCulley, of course. but created by the guy that created Zorro, and it was like this tragic character. And Mayday Trip and I happened upon this conversation where we just happened to mention this character. So it would be interesting because Mayday was working on kind of a version of that character. It would be interesting to see. But I have an issue, courtesy of your collection, hold on, that I would love to see this character utilized in some way. It's not one of the kind of pulp characters, but
Oh yeah.
Concrete.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what Paul Chadwick has been up to lately, but Concrete was such a interesting comic. I mean, kind of like Madman in a way, tonally in some ways, as far as like there were moments of action and moments of surrealism and moments of depression. But the artistic style was, of course, very different. Paul Chadwick has a very different style, but that would be cool to see in some way.
Yeah, I remember Concrete being one of the little indie darlings of the 90s with Madman and Bone
Hmm.
and Concrete. It seemed like, I mean, I'm sure you could group Hellboy into that. But I just remember Wizard probably did like some big article on the indie books of that day of of that time, and it probably just had Concrete and Madman in there at the same time. Wizard magazine, for its faults, and I know it had some faults in retrospect, it did introduce me to it was my outlet for fandom. I think we've
Hmm.
talked about this before, but introduced me to Bone, introduced
Oh
me to
yeah,
Madman. Yeah, all these things I wouldn't have had no clue uh,
yeah.
because this was before the internet, kids. So it
That's
would have
right,
been
youngsters.
right. That was our internet. That was our uh, fan page that we went to. Um, but yeah,
And whether it was a bag trading card or an inset, just little panel or some story, like there were so many characters that I got to know. Madman was my introduction through Wizard. I would not have probably known that character because there were comic shops, but as we've talked about, they were ephemeral. Like you'd have a comic shop that showed up and then left. So and
yeah,
not all of them would, of course, carry some of those books too at the time. So, Wizard did a wonderful job in being a hub for people. But I guess the Comics Reporter does YouTube. I'm going to YouTube that Space Ghost and Batman team up later. I know I'm doing that.
yeah. Another character, and he did have a series recently that I would love to see get a little more uh, limelight is Daredevil, like
Yeah.
the Daredevil before Matt Murdock with the half red, half blue, and spiky belt and boomerangs. That Daredevil. If anybody's listening and they don't know that Daredevil, he was probably 40s, kind of in that pulp
Hmm.
era. I think it seems like his enemy was Mr. Claw, but I'm not quite certain. I never read much of the Golden Age stuff, but I just thought he was visually striking, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, another character, while we're on this beat, this will be my last one, and then we can talk about what we're reading if you want to, or anything else on Space Ghost, of course. Another character that I have some appreciation for, I've been rewatching the 90s animated series because, I've been on a big kick of that this summer. Uh, doesn't matter what it is, I've been checking it out. It would actually be cool and interesting to me to see a fresh take on RoboCop.
Yeah,
RoboCop. When I saw RoboCore in this book for 2 seconds, I was like, "What?" And then I reread it,
yeah,
and I was like, "Oh, RoboCop, RoboCore." So there was kind of like the violent, not ultraviolet, but ultra violent stuff,
yeah.
and then it became a Saturday morning cartoon.
It did, yeah.
So I know they tried to retread it about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, but it would be interesting to see where they could take a property like that, maybe instead of redoing Terminator again. That would be interesting to see.
And I think Frank Miller had a big hand in the RoboCop movie, like
Uh-huh.
the first movie. Did he write it? Is that right?
I'll have to fact check it. I'll have to look it up, but I know he did a comic version. I
Yeah,
know there was that.
Jim Lee
Um,
even did some covers of with RoboCop, which were,
mhm,
you know, pretty amazing at the time. But yeah,
yeah.
that was an interesting character. I hate the movies kind of fizzled out there. The number one was such a huge hit, and then I think what two and three, is that right?
Hmm.
Had a couple more. Yeah, I don't think they caught the public's attention. I love the one where he flew, but now I look back on that one, I'm like, oh, that was a little bad. But I mean, it was RoboCop flying. I was a comic guy.
Yeah.
I was gonna love that.
Same, same. Uh, he is not credited on IMDb. Frank Miller is not credited as a writer, but I know he had. The graphic novel is Frank Miller and Stephen Grant.
That was a great character as well. What are you reading
Yeah.
now, Mr. D Hart?
Well, as I mentioned before we hit record, I'm currently checking out the short stories of one Ronald Moffey. You and I share a love of horror stories as well, I think, especially in the short story vein, with Stephen King and such. But I picked up this set of five novellas called They Lurk, and let me tell you, the first novella, Skullbelly, has some cool things going on in it. For fans of the Cryptozoic, I would recommend checking out that book. And excited to read some more of the contents of this set of novellas. And of course, I've been reading the comics, keeping up in some ways with what's been going on. I checked out the first issue of Bloodletter from the Todd McFarlane verse. That was
Okay.
cool. Checked out Batman Dark Patterns from a recommendation from you. And Batman 89 Echoes just wrapped up. So I enjoyed reading the last issue of that where it was like a lot going on. Like they had to do a lot to tie up that series, but I'm glad they finally wrapped up the series. I hope if they do another one, they work on some of their deadlines and stuff because I really enjoyed it. But the last issue before this one was published in December, and this one came out in July, so that was a little bit of work time, but worth the wait, I think. Worth the wait, I think.
Yeah. Very nice. What
Yeah,
was the Batman series I recommended? Batman what?
Dark Patterns, Dark
Dark Patterns.
Patterns.
Man, that was so good. Like I
Hmm.
stumbled across that on the DC app and I just love that. And uh tonally I thought it was very Frank Miller-ish, kind of Batman Year
Hmm.
One, just that kind of voice, you know?
Yeah.
Um and I thought the art was just fantastic, especially the cityscapes. Whoever that I forget the artist. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but that artist does some amazing cityscapes. And since Gotham is almost it's a character in its own right, it's great to see it handled with such love and care in the comic. Since, like I say, it's almost a character in its own right.
Hayden Sherman is
Oh,
credited as the artist on that. Hayden Sherman.
okay, all right. One that I'm reading right now is the Spider-Man Wolverine series, and it's
Ah,
yeah, the art duties are being handled by Kari Andrews. And this is my plug for Kari Andrews. First of all, come on the show. I really want to talk to you, Kari Andrews. But his art, I love his art. It is very 90s reminiscent with a modern spin on it. I could just look at that art all day, but even the story's interesting. It's a little bit, it kind of overlaps with Civil War a little bit from the movies, from the MCU, because there is like some connection between Spider-Man and Wolverine that had, up until this point had not been known. And I think there's still a mystery as to exactly what happened there, but it's good stuff. It's fun. I would
yeah,
suggest it
yeah.
to anybody.
Marvel's doing some interesting crossover stuff these days. They really are. They have the Predators taking over stuff too, because as
Mhm.
as Deadpool has taught us, 20th Century Fox is now in like the Loki zone in Marvel. So anything 20th Century Fox, ripe for a takeover.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, do we have anything else for today?
Well, I just want to shout out one more call of love to Dynamite, the work they're doing. David Pepose, he's a genius. Jonathan Lau, great art working there in the Space Ghost. I've really enjoyed that series, and it was awesome to see it come back. It made me excited about reading a series, which is not something that always happens. And I believe next up, are we still sticking in the universe of DC and such?
I mean, it can be whatever. I will read whatever. Did you have
Cool.
a recommendation for us for the next one?
Well, well, I do have a Secret Origins Spectre and Deadman. That might be cool.
That sounds good to me. Well, I guess that about does it for today.
That does it. Stay obsessive, everybody. Stay obsessive with comics. It's a relatively safe obsession, provided that you budget well.
Yeah, that's important. All right. Well, stay obsessive. And if like I say, if you want to reach out to us through email, we would love to hear from you. We'd read it, on the podcast, if it was appropriate. Um, yeah, reach out to us. I think it's called the Comic Obsessive Podcast at Gmail. Just reach out to us. Let us know what you think of the show and what else we should cover. But besides that, I guess I'll say stay obsessive.